possibly even about the same height.
Right, so about 5'10".
Yeah, a bit taller than perhaps most of his countrymen.
How does he compare then physically to a modern inhabitant of Orkney?
Very similar. They're good, strong people, but usually pretty fit. So I think, yes, very similar.
The preponderance of blue-eyed blondes on the islands is a compelling bit of evidence. But are the islanders today tall and fit because they're descended from Vikings? Or simply because they eat better than their runty Pictish forebears? I'm turning to our face expert, Dr. Tony Little, to see what clues we can find in the facial features of today's Orcadians. Using the latest face recognition software, he's been able to compare a composite, typical Orcadian face with the Nordic equivalent.
So what's happening on the left-hand side of the screen is that each individual face is being morphed into the average shape from the Orkneys, and then each of those morphed shapes is being superimposed one on top of the other to create an average image.
Tony has identified some key features which are strikingly similar in the Norwegian and the Orkney faces.
You can see that it's characterised by having quite full lips, and it's also got quite a thin nose. And I think one striking thing about this image is that the jaw size, the chin size seems quite large.
But in the faces are clear differences too. The jaw is heavier in Orkney than in Norway, and the faces seem thicker set. The two faces are similar, but not identical. Will this be reflected in the DNA results? Another volunteer whose DNA is helping Sir Walter in his quest to find Viking blood is Jack Rendell. Rendell is an old Viking name, and Jack's family roots are firmly planted here at Ratwick on the island of Hoy. In fact, Jack still lives in a house dating back centuries, on the homestead occupied by his family as long as it's possible to tell.
So Jack, do you remember the people who lived in these houses that we can see?
I can remember 35 people living there. I think there were about 28 houses when I was a wee boy. Well, there's still about 28 houses now, but most of them are holiday houses. And there are only 5 permanent residents.
On another branch of Jack's family tree is one of Scotland's most distinguished musicians, his cousin, Evelyn Glennie. Eager to know more about her Orkney roots,
Hello,
Evelyn is also taking part in the genetics study.
Not bad, thank you.
So when did you last survey this scene?
Well, I think I may have been about 8 years old, 8 or 10 years old. So, you know, we're talking about probably just under 30 years now, a long time ago.
And how much do you know about your own family history related to this island?
Very little, other than the fact that there are many relatives here and on my mother's side. And, you know, I've never really taken the time to follow our family tree, to delve into that. And I'm really eager to find out more.
The fact that our cousin Jack has an Old Norse surname suggests that Jack and Evelyn have Viking ancestry. But how strong is the Viking signal in their genes? Are they descended from a union between a Viking man and a Pictish woman? After a bit of genealogical spadework, I discover an important chapter in Jack and Evelyn's shared family history. A twist of fate 300 years ago, which should help us understand better the profile of their DNA.
Jack, can you explain just how you and Evelyn are related?
Well, we're related through the history of the wreck of the Crown. A ship that was wrecked off Dearness in 1679, I think.
Jack and Evelyn's ancestors were religious dissenters, so-called Covenanters, who fought for the rebellious Scottish Presbyterian cause. In 1679, they were captured and sentenced to spend the rest of their lives as slaves in the American colonies. They were packed onto a slave ship, which, on the 10th of December, reached Orkney in the eye of a storm. A monument marks the spot on the headland where the slave ship hit the rocks.
But the captain had ordered that the prisoners be locked in the hold. Some say that a crewman got back on board with a key and unlocked the hatches. Others say that he did it with an axe. But either way, his efforts meant that around 50 men managed to get up on deck and into the water and swam to shore. For the 200 left behind, it was a sad end. they all drowned. Of the 50 that made it ashore, most were recaptured and transported, so only a handful actually evade capture, and John Richardson is among them.
Wow.
And John made it to the village of Rackwick on Hoy, and the rest is your story.
That's incredible. I had no idea. I'm lost for words, actually. You know, I really am. It's incredible. It's quite moving. It really is.
But you wouldn't have a story, perhaps, at all, if you hadn't managed to do what you did.
It really is.
So you feel quite connected to that?
Yeah, I do. I do. It's a strange sort of feeling. You know, I didn't think, you know, I'd feel like this. You know, it's unbelievable. It really is. God.
Thompson and Richardson settled here and married local girls. But they weren't alone. When the Orkney Islands were handed over to the Scots in the 15th century, there were many others of Pictish descent who came here from the mainland and settled. In other words, the Viking genetic presence has been diluted considerably over the centuries by more and more Pictish DNA. 1200 years later, will we find any trace of the Vikings at all? Sir Walter's team have finished their analysis. It's time to draw back the veil on the early bloody history of these islands.